Academica Media. You are listening to Charter School Superstars, bringing you the voices of an education revolution.
Welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Ryan Kairalla. Our guest this week on the program is the CEO and co-founder of Classcraft, an online and app-based learning management platform that uses gamification and video game psychology to achieve positive student learning outcomes and to help schools meet non-curricular cognitive goals with their students. You can find out more about our guest's work by visiting www.classcraft.com. We are happy to welcome Shawn Young onto Charter School Superstars. Hi, Shawn.
Hey, Ryan. How's it going?
It's going very, very well. I got to say, I've been a fan of this platform for a long time. I remember seeing you guys at conferences about 10 years ago, and I've always been kind of interested in what you do, so I'm excited to be chatting with you right now. What I like about what Classcraft does, which is sort of the centerpiece of your platform, is it's a learning management platform that emphasizes video game psychology and gamification principles to bring about positive learning outcomes. So can you tell us, to start off, what does it mean for a learning management platform to use video game psychology? How does a Classcraft class look different from a traditional classroom that we might see in a charter school?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think that there's, for better, for worse, games have been used in all kinds of different ways in education in the past. And, what we're doing is pretty different from, say, game-based learning, which is, play a video game or play a game and learn, fractions, for example. So that would be a math game-based experience. What we're doing is really saying, run your classroom, run your school as though it was a game. So using the culture, the mechanics of games to foster intrinsic motivation. And so I think that the what's really interesting about using game psychology is really this piece around intrinsic motivation. We know best practice for student engagement is find ways to foster intrinsic motivation. The truth is that it's intrinsic is you want to do something for its own merit. Extrinsic is you do something because for the reward or to avoid the punishment. Games are by definition something that foster intrinsic motivation, right? Nobody's forcing kids to play video games. Nobody's paying them to do that. So some esports things, but generally billions of people playing games, and it's because they want to. And the reason that they want to is because games are designed to foster intrinsic motivation. And so there's three core components in motivational theory for that, self-determination theory. So the first one is competency. We're motivated by situations where we feel like we're developing mastery or where we have mastery. So, that's the whole, look at a game like Tetris, great example. Tetris has no story, no purpose, no social features. When we were kids, we were playing on Game Boys, and you couldn't even share your points or spend them or anything. The points were just there to tell you how good you're doing versus yourself.
Yeah.
And so we're really motivated as human beings by situations where we can see ourselves progressing or where we feel we've developed mastery. Second one is controllability. So games are by definition a medium where you, the player, are in control of something. So another example of that is, for example, Minecraft is a much played video game that doesn't have points or levels. So it's a completely different motivator than Tetris. It's a brick-based game with terrible graphics, but completely different motivator.
Yeah.
And the motivator there is you're in control. You can, design and build things to your heart's content. And the third one is relatedness. So being able to share these experiences with other human beings. And of course, games are really good for that, especially online games. And so with Classcraft, what we're doing is saying, in essence, a game is a made up system of rules that changes an experience. And so, the task of a game, for example, golfing is a game. Well, the task of golfing, if I were to say, hey, Ryan, what's the point of golf? You would say, take that ball, put it in that hole over there. Probably, that's kind of the goal.
They make it sound so simple when you say it like that. And yet when I get out there, the
right,
ball goes everywhere but the hole. But yeah.
Exactly. But because of rules, right? Because if I were to not give you no context about golf, you'd probably just pick up the ball, walk over, drop it in the hole.
I've
and
been
say,
known to do that anyway, but
oh yeah,
yeah.
well that's cheating. And if I were to say, hey, Ryan, do that 500 times, you would say that's work. You got to pay me. That's actually a lot of walking. Um, and then I say, oh no, wait, forget it. I forgot to tell you, like, here's a bag of clubs and you got to hit the ball with it. And by the way, you can't do this in an infinite amount of shots. And oh, by the way, like, I like how you're dressed, but that's not appropriate. You got to go home and change to match our dress code here. And in essence, what I'm doing is taking a completely nonsensical task of put a ball in a hole, task that has no meaning, creating meaning, and completely flipping the narrative around the motivation. People who like go wake up on a Sunday to go play golf, I'm not paying them. They're paying the golf course owner to do that. So they're in fact paying their own money to be able to go do that instead of getting paid to go do that work. And so that's what we're doing with Classcraft. We're saying we're taking a set of a situation, which is school, which for a lot of kids does not have a lot of meaning, putting in place structures that create meaning and generate competency relatedness and controllability. So in essence, if you're running a Classcraft class, kids will level up. They'll earn points. They'll get points for doing things like handing in homework on time or participating well or being inclusive. And as they get these points, they level up in avatars. They level up that avatar. They get cool digital swag, which is, culturally relevant for them,
Yeah.
for their character, but also real life powers. Things like you can hand in an assignment a day late or eat in class or go to the bathroom, whatever teachers want to put in. It's all immensely customizable. And so in essence, we're saying to teachers, kids love games. Games, regardless of video games or, an example like sports, are situations that are designed to foster intrinsic motivation. And here's a really robust, pedagogically vetted, lots of research system for you to be able to harness that and do that in your own classroom.
It's so cool. And I'll say, ever since I heard about the things that Classcraft does, in addition to like telling everybody I know in education, you got to check out this company, Classcraft, it's also made me sort of rethink the way I teach to try to put more intrinsic motivation. So, I mean, obviously, Classcraft is a really dynamic platform that has a lot under the hood that kind of makes it really effective. But as far as I'm concerned, it begins with a very simple thought, which is let's take what makes video games engaging, that makes you play them for hours, that makes that makes you want to keep playing, even though like nobody like is paying you to play them, and use those things in education. And one example of it when you talk about competency-based learning that I've always like kind of preached the gospel of is the idea like you play a video game and your character dies because it falls off the cliff or something. Does the game like not let you play anymore? Like, does it say you got an F
your
and then
TV
you're stuck?
explodes?
Yeah. No, like your character like takes a couple steps like back and you get to try the thing again.
Yes.
And obviously we like that about video games. We like to be able to learn from our mistakes, and education, and at least traditional education, doesn't let you do that, right? You mess up the assignment, you get a bad grade, it's carved into stone, and you just get to move on to the next assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And that really saps your internal motivation. And you guys, by developing this, competency-based learning model, if you don't get all the experience points on the assignment, you can retry the assignment again until you achieve the competency, and you stay motivated because you get to learn from your mistakes. And that's a very simple idea of video game psychology that you guys implemented in Classcraft that makes your platform so much more engaging just by taking what works in video games. I dig it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're saying, oh, it's video game psychology. Well, yes and no. I mean, it's just general psychology, really. Like, what's special about video games is that there's a concept and a mechanism that already exists to make it easy to do that. Lives, right? Like in Mario Brothers, it's lives. And so why should we be borrowing from games? It's because the systems already exist. They're already invented. The psychology is, hey, testing is high stakes, and that's why it's demotivating, right? It's because, and even if it's not, end of year standardized test, it's still high stakes because there's no undo, right? And for a lot of kids, what that means is I'm probably just going to mess this up, and why make any more effort? And that's what leads to chronic disengagement. And so the idea that you can't try and try again until you get better, which is so like strange that that's not fundamental to education, because we know, that's how, we learn is
In
by trying
every
things,
other
like,
sector of
yeah,
the world,
exactly. Yeah.
that's how we advance as humans, is we learn from our mistakes, except we don't do that in education.
Yeah, yeah, and think of the feedback too. Like, there's something really powerful when you think about like, "Hey Ryan, you did this great thing. Here's some points. Hey Ryan, you did this. Here's some points." And so what I'm doing is giving you constant feedback. I'm telling you, here's how you win at this game, the
Yeah.
game of school. And when you do those things, you'll get constant feedback. So reinforcement's great, and we need that feedback as learners, right? Like, if I were to tell you, "Hey, answer 2 plus 2," and you're like, "Is it 6?" and I give you no feedback, how are you ever going to learn that it's 4? Right? At some
Right.
point, you need to, like, when you say 4, I need to say that's the right answer. Good job. Like, and how did you get to that? Right? And it's the same thing for aptitudes as a learner, right? Like, if I'm telling you, "Hey, I need you to collaborate well with your peers," well, when you do that, I need to tell you, "Hey, that's exactly right. You're collaborating well right now," and give you feedback so that you know to repeat that behavior again. Because a lot of the classroom management that we're doing in schools is actually not like that at all. It's controlled behaviors, right? So it's like, take any kid in the hallway in an elementary school and say, "Hey, what are you supposed to be doing right now in the hallway?" Well, they'll be able to tell you for the most part what they're not supposed to be doing. I know I shouldn't be running, shouldn't be cussing, shouldn't be yelling, shouldn't be fighting. That's what I shouldn't be doing. Yeah, but what are you supposed to be doing? They don't know. And that's not learning. That's just avoiding negative consequences.
Yeah.
And so there's something really empowering when you think about changing the mindset of, here are the things, here's how you level up, and you're gaining levels. And if you ask a kid, "Hey, are you doing well at school?" they'll say, "Well, I'm level 32 in classcraft." That tells me that I'm doing well, because when you think about it, math scores, like, let's go back to gradings with F's, for example. Let's say I give you a whole unit on fractions, then you do a test, you get 65. Then we go on and do geometry. You work your butt off. We do a test. You get 65 again. What I'm communicating to you as a learner is you didn't progress, right? Like, that's how kids are interpreting that. I got
Yeah.
65 both times, where in fact you learned completely different things. You learned, geometry instead of fractions. You actually progressed in your math knowledge. But what I'm telling you is, no matter how hard you work, you're going to suck. Um, and that's a huge game changer, just that shift for kids of saying, like, "Hey, the things that I'm doing are being recognized and they're leading to my own progress." That's a big mind shift for them.
Yeah. That's incredible insight. And it's funny, right? Because when we just sort of express these things in the abstract, like, they don't seem that controversial. Like, you explain this to anybody, they'd be like, "Yeah, that makes sense."
Yeah.
And yet schools have been sort of stuck in the old model forever. And when we try to make the change happen in K-12, there's a lot of resistance. I mean, since you've been kind of advocating for this sort of learning for so long, do you have any theories as to why that is the case? Like, why has K-12 been so slow to change?
Well, we're talking about a lot of different things here, but specifically for assessment,
Yeah.
I think one of the big reasons is we're not very good at classroom management,
Mm.
and systemically, and we can see that by suspension rates and disproportionalities that we see. I mean, even post pandemic, the increase in behavior incidents is crazy. So we're not very good at it. And one of the main levers teachers have is extrinsic motivators, and their biggest and bestest and favorite is, you're going to get bad grades. And so we're really reticent to let go of this grading model, because we're using it to control kids,
Mm.
and we're controlling kids to make our lives easier as teachers. I was a teacher for 10 years, so I feel like I'm allowed to talk as a teacher still, even though I've been taught for a while. But um, the a lot of teachers are using grades as a way to get kids to comply, and we're not using grades as a way to give kids feedback about their progress or to help them. A lot of teachers won't even go back on an assignment. Like, if your class has a 56% average, are you going to go back and reteach that stuff? Well, you should, because the point is that, but a lot of teachers are just busy getting along with the curriculum
Right.
instead of using assessments as a way to, learn about their own teaching. right?
Yeah.
Like in a lot of ways, assessments are tell us about a specific kid, but the bulk of assessments should tell us about our own teaching and what's not connecting and not getting through to kids. And so I think we have this misconception. We've gone down this slippery slope of using assessments as a way to control kids as a way instead of as a way to improve our own teaching. And so I think we're reticent to let that go because that means letting go control. And it's scary because if I don't control the kids, they're all going to go out of control and it's
Yeah.
going to like chaos will break loose. And so I think there's a lot of fear related to that. And I mean, and when you think about like adoption of new tech, it's the same thing. Like, why don't teachers want to adopt more tech faster? It's because control. Like if I use this tech and it gets, I implement it wrong, I'm in front of the kids, I'll lose credibility or I'll lose my period and so like a lot of the stay putism in education, I think is based in the belief that we need to control the kids
Right.
and that there are no alternative strategies to get them to behave the way we want, and our fear of letting go of that control.
Well, since we're talking about classroom management, student behavior, I think it might be good to quickly shift the discussion over to using this kind of psychology for non-curricular goals. I know your organization has set up some new tools recently and is talking a lot more about how these elements can help with non-curricular cognitive skills, things like SEL,
Yep.
positive behavioral interventions. Can you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing in that area right now?
Yeah, totally. So, there's so Classcraft, when your idea of school is it's a game, then the question is, what are the rules of the game? How do I win? And the way you win at Classcraft is you, just like in a video game, is you behave in a certain way. Like, how do I win at Mario Brothers? When I reach a hole, I jump over the hole. Otherwise, I'll never win. And it's the same with school. How do I win at school? Well, I show up on time. I, do the work I'm supposed to do. I participate. I have a good attitude. These are things, or, those are like general ways to win at school. But if I want to improve at school, I need to be learning things like, self-organizing my work, being more autonomous, understanding my moods and my emotions, managing my stress. It's super stressful for a lot of kids' school. So let's teach them how to manage that stress so they can become better at the game of school. Um, and and so these are skills. So how do you learn skills? How do I learn any skill? Well, there's a few ways, but there's not a million ways. Most of the time, the answer is practice,
Yeah.
right? If I were to learn karate and you were my sensei, you wouldn't come on here and lecture me about karate moves for 2 hours and then all of a sudden I know how to do them. You'd show me and then I would practice, and while I'm practicing you would come by and say, you know what, Shawn, like put your hips into it, or you got to raise your elbow higher when you punch, or whatever it is. I don't know karate, but my point is it's the same thing with all of these skills. Let's say I'm trying to teach you how to manage your stress. Well, I'll say, here's what it looks like, and here's some things that I do when I manage my stress. Now, when I see you managing your stress after, I need to see you and I need to tell you, hey, Ryan, good job. You're managing your stress. That looks great. Oh, and by the way, everybody, look, this is what it looks like. This is awesome. And in doing that, A, you're doing the right thing. B, it's a game, so you're winning. So
Yeah.
that feels really great. Um, and C, I'm also assessing while I do that if I'm using a digital system. So with Classcraft, instead of just saying, hey guys, look, Ryan, good job, Ryan, here's a high five, because that's what's happening in Classcraft. But on top, because I'm doing that in a digital way, I'm going into the app and doing that by giving you points. What's happening is I'm actually collecting data about your progress on this skill at the same time. I'll say, hey, Ryan, good job managing your stress. Hey, high fives. But while I'm doing that, I'll have like, hey, manage stress, X day, manage stress X day, manage stress X day, and I'm seeing progress. And so we get observable data of these observations that you're then able to use to report back on, students' development. One of the big challenges about these skills and this SEL stuff is assessment. How do I measure if kids have better SEL skills, for
Yeah.
example. Well, it's not by asking them, how do you feel today every day of the week? And then saying, well, they felt happier this year than last year. That doesn't mean they have better skills. That just means they're in a better mood. And it's not by multiple choice. I'm not going to let me teach you about empathy. Here's a multiple choice exam about empathy. Now I know you have empathy. No, I need to see you in the schoolyard behaving in an empathetic manner. And then I need to log that so that I'm able to go back and look at your progress. And so what's cool about Classcraft is we're telling teachers, tell kids what it means to win. So stop trying to control them. Instead, teach them skills so that they become better and you don't have to control them. And by the way, do it in a way that's super fun for them. And oh, by the way, if you do that, you'll get all this data that you can then use to assess these kids if you need to, or see their progress, or talk to their parents, or talk to, a lot of kids now have IDA plans, et cetera, tier 2, tier 3 interventions. Well, this is all super useful data to be able to build intervention plans and IEPs.
Without a doubt. Our guest this week has been Shawn Young. He is the CEO and co-founder of Classcraft. Find out more about his work by visiting www.classcraft.com. Shawn, this is so cool. I mean, you're appealing to, education and video games, which are like the two things I love the most in this world. So this has been an absolute blast. Great catching up with your organization and seeing the cool stuff you're up to. Before we let you go, one last question for you. If with the snap of your fingers you could make any change to the education system, what change would it be?
That's a tough question to answer. There's a lot of things we could change. I mean, I really believe that we as a society need to value the educational system more. And that's really hard to do because a lot of people have trauma from their own education. So if I'm using a wish, I'm like erasing lots of trauma, making people love and trust schools again. And with that would come kids being happy to be there, teachers happy to be there, teachers feeling like their profession is recognized to the value that it brings to society, and pay coming along with it, and people happy to pay tax dollars for schools, so, it kind of solves a lot of the things. But I think we have a perception issue about the value school has for us in our society. There's a lot of mistrust nowadays around schools. And, my vision for school is that it's a really positive, harmonious building block of community. It's its own little community, but it builds future community as well. And I think we need to, in the blink of an eye, go back to that mindset as soon as we can.
Couldn't agree more. Shawn, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for being on the program this week.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
And thank you all for checking out Charter School Superstars.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.